Good morning, everyone. I want to tell you something about the truth, about how it moves, and about what happens when it has been suppressed or hidden or managed into a version of itself that is more convenient for the person doing the managing than it is accurate to what is actually real. For long enough that the management itself becomes visible to everyone who has been watching. The truth cannot be hidden indefinitely. That is not a spiritual platitude. It is a practical observation of how reality works. When what is being maintained requires more energy than can be sustainably invested in the maintaining of it, something eventually gives. And what gives is always the version, not the truth. Because the truth does not require maintenance to remain true. Only the version does. Welcome. And let me tell you what just happened, or what is about to happen in the situation you have been navigating with someone who was not being honest about who they were, or what they were doing, or what was actually true beneath the version they were presenting to you and to others. The truth came out, not because you forced it, not because you staged an exposure or manufactured the conditions under which it would become visible, not because of anything you deliberately did to make this happen in this form at this time, because maintaining a false version of reality is exhausting, and exhausting things eventually collapse under the weight of their own unsustainability without anyone needing to push the collapse toward them. It arrives on its own schedule, which is the schedule of how long false things can be maintained before the maintenance costs more than the person maintaining can pay. That schedule has arrived, and the truth is now visible to everyone who is watching. Whew. I want to describe what happened, or what is happening, in the most honest terms I can, without gratuitousness, without savoring what is painful for another person, because I do not think that serves you well, or anyone well, but with full honesty about the reality of it. Because you deserve that honesty after what you have been through, navigating a situation that was not being presented to you honestly. Something was not true in what this person was showing you, or telling you, or allowing you to believe about them, or about the situation between you, or about their intentions, or their commitments, or any of the things that you were receiving as true because they were being presented as true, and you had no particular reason to doubt the presentation at the time that something has now become visible in its actual form rather than the managed version that was being sustained through whatever effort was going into the maintaining of a version of events that was not fully accurate. I want to speak about what the visibility costs the person whose version has become visible as a version rather than as the truth, because I think understanding their experience is important for how you hold your own in the aftermath of this revelation. The panic is real, not performed, not the strategic panic of someone who has calculated that panicking might produce sympathy or forgiveness or the restoration of something that the revelation has disrupted. Real panic, the specific kind that belongs to someone who has been managing something that required a great deal of energy and attention to manage, and who is now confronting the reality that the managing has failed and that what was being managed is now simply out there without the managed frame around it. That was keeping it from being what it actually is in the view of everyone watching. The panic is about exposure, about the specific and disorienting experience of having the gap between who you presented yourself to be and who you actually are become visible to the people whose perception of you have been working to control through the version you were maintaining. That gap is now visible, and visible gaps between presentation and reality are among the most uncomfortable things a person can experience in the social and relational dimension of their life, because they require a reckoning with themselves that the maintaining of the version was specifically designed to avoid. Now, I want to speak about what this means for you, because this is the part that most directly concerns you, and the part I want to give the most specific and careful attention. You have been navigating something that was not fully honest, which means you have been making decisions and responding to situations based on information that was not complete or accurate or representative of what was actually happening. That is disorienting to discover, even when the discovery feels like relief, even when the visibility of the truth confirms something you sensed but could not verify in the period before the revelation, when the version was still being maintained and your own perception was being offered a managed reality rather than the actual one. The disorientation is normal, and it belongs to the transition between navigating something with incomplete information and navigating it with the full picture that the revelation has now provided. Give yourself time to recalibrate, to update your understanding of what was actually happening and what that means for the decisions you made and the ones you are now going to make with the full information that was not available to you before. I want to speak about the clown suit because it is the most vivid image in the title, and I want to address it in the way I think it is most useful to understand it. The clown suit is not something you put on them. That is the most important thing I want to say about it. You did not dress them in it. You did not arrange the exposure or create the conditions under which their version became visible as a version, rather than as the truth. They put on the clown suit when they chose to present a version of reality that was not accurate to people who deserved the accurate version, and then continued to maintain that version for as long as the maintaining was possible, which was longer than they could ultimately sustain. The suit was always there, on the person wearing it. The only thing that changed is that it is now visible to everyone rather than only to the person wearing it and to the few who were paying close enough attention to see what was actually happening beneath the managed presentation. I want to tell you what your role actually was in this becoming visible, because even though you did not orchestrate the exposure, you contributed to it in a way that I think is important to understand and to own in the most honest and self-respecting way. Your role was simply being real. When something genuinely real is placed in proximity to something that is performing realness without actually being real, the contrast over time makes the performance visible as performance rather than as substance. Your consistency, your honesty in how you show up, your refusal to manage or perform yourself into a version more convenient for someone else's management of reality, created the contrast that eventually made what they were doing visible for what it was to anyone paying attention. You did not expose them by doing anything aggressive. You exposed them by being real, and real things in the proximity of things that are not real eventually illuminate the difference between the two. I want to speak now about what comes after this moment, because revelation is a beginning, not an ending. And I think it is important to speak about what you do with the full picture now that it is available to you in a way it was not before. The first thing, let the revelation settle before you make decisions based on it. Revelations arrive with a particular energy that can feel like urgency, like the need to immediately respond or act or address what has become visible in the most direct and immediate way possible. Resist that urgency, not permanently, but long enough for the full picture to be absorbed and for your decisions to come from the integrated understanding of what has been revealed, rather than from the raw energy of the revelation itself, which is not always the most reliable guide to what should happen next. Let it settle. Then decide. The second thing, do not spend this moment in the watching of their panic. I know that might sound counterintuitive, given that the panic is evidence of the very thing you were navigating now becoming visible to them and to everyone else. But the watching of their panic keeps your attention on them, and your attention is one of the most valuable things you have. And it belongs in this moment on you and on what comes next for you, not on what is happening to them as the consequence of their own choices. Coming back to them in the natural way that consequences work, when they are finally allowed to arrive, their process is theirs. Your process is yours, and your process in this moment deserves your full attention more than their panic does. The third thing, let the revelation update your understanding of what happened between you and this person retroactively, because the full picture changes the meaning of some of what was experienced in the period before the revelation, when the version was still being maintained. Some things that seemed like one thing were actually another, and the retroactive understanding of that is important for how you carry forward what the experience was in your own story, so that you carry the accurate version rather than the managed one. That was the only version available. While the maintaining was still in effect, update the understanding. Let the full picture reorganize what was experienced into something more accurate than the version you had access to. Before the revelation arrived, I also want to say something about how to hold this person going forward, because I think this is an important part of what comes after a revelation like this one. And I want to offer a perspective that serves you rather than simply feeling good in the immediate term without being useful in the longer one. The person who was not honest with you was operating from something that has very little to do with you and a great deal to do with themselves, with their own fear or their own need to manage how they are perceived, or their own inability to be fully honest. In situations where honesty feels threatening to something they value about themselves or their position or how they are seen, that does not excuse the dishonesty. Nothing does. But it does locate it correctly as something that comes from inside them, rather than something that was produced by anything about you, or by the situation, or by anything external to the person who made the choice to present a version of reality rather than reality itself. Hold them there in the correct location as someone who did something that came from their own limitations, rather than as someone whose actions reflect anything about your value or your judgment or what you deserve from the people in your life. Wah, because you deserve honesty from the people who occupy space in your life, the real version, not the managed one, not the version that serves the person offering it at the expense of the accuracy that you deserve to receive as someone who's genuinely trying to navigate the actual reality of your life with real information. What you were given was not that. And the revelation of that fact, while difficult, is ultimately a gift of the specific kind that difficult truths are gifts, in that they restore the accuracy that was temporarily or deliberately absent from your experience of the situation. You have the accuracy now. Use it to build something that is grounded in what is actually true, rather than in what was presented as true by someone who was not ready or willing to offer you the real version. They are in panic mode now because the real version is visible, and what is visible cannot be unseen by the people who are now seeing it, which means the version that required so much maintenance is no longer available as the frame through which this person and what they did is understood. That is uncomfortable for them, deeply uncomfortable in the specific way of someone who has been operating behind a managed presentation and who is now without it, having to be in the real version of who they are. And what they did without the frame that was making it look like something else, that is their work to do, not yours. Yours is this: taking what the revelation has given you, which is the full picture, and using it to move forward in the most honest and grounded way available to you, now that the accuracy has been restored to your experience of the situation. Forward with the full information, without the weight of what was withheld. Now that it is no longer withheld, but simply known, and with the understanding that what just happened because you were real, consistently, without performance, and real things eventually illuminate the difference between themselves and what is only performing being real. That is what you did, simply by being yourself, without trying to expose anything, without staging anything, without doing anything other than being real in the sustained and consistent way that you have always been. The truth came out, because truth always does. Eventually, on its own schedule, which is the schedule of how long the maintaining can be sustained before the sustaining becomes more than can be paid. And you were here, real and consistent and honest when it did, which is exactly where you should be,